we've kind of skirted around it, and give me your feelings on downtown. While you were on council, that was we had Mayor Graham Richard, and he was visionary for the downtown. Where do you think we're at?
I think we've compared to when I first got on council years ago, it's tremendously improved from where it was. Because remember, the courthouse square wasn't there, and that's a beautiful addition. The Harrison Square, I think, ultimately will prove to be a big draw to downtown. So I think we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting downtown. I want to make downtown attractive to people to invest in. And one of the reasons I want to get back on council is to keep regulation to a minimum. Because one thing about bureaucracies, they tend to like to increase their power by adding more and more regulations, which is an impediment to development. I'll give you a specific example. When I was on council, we had a downtown zoning ordinance coming, and in there, they had a downtown review committee. Okay, this review committee was going to look. Say you're the developer, you want to build a building or a business. Okay, well, you not only had to bring in the plans for your building, you had to bring in the plans for the buildings on both sides of you. I'm not sure how you were supposed to get those, and you had to give them all the plans. You had to tell them what was going to be in there, and you had to tell them all the materials you were going to use in your building, down to and including not only the fabric, but the pattern of your awning you were going to have in your building. And they had to approve that before you could proceed. Now, to me, that's just, that's way over the top. So I gutted that, took it out, amended it out. And if you would look at the face of bureaucrats sometime when you do that, it's like you're gutting their baby at the table, okay? But that's the kind of stuff I pick up on, that I don't want that kind of stuff. I mean, the guy that owns the building, that's starting the business, he has the greatest self-interest to make that building as attractive and as economically productive as possible, rather than somebody who just happens to like, striped awnings or something. So I think that's another reason that I think we might be going too far, putting too many regulations and stuff on government, because we go through that. It's a continuing, never-ending process to try to keep the regulations to developers to a minimum. We had a task force reduction committee in 2000 that I chaired, and we went through all these things. We had developers come and business people. One of the big bugaboos back then was the landscape ordinance. It drove them crazy. So we modified it some. I tried to modify it even more, but I couldn't get it as much as I wanted, but I moved it further to the less regulation side. And that got better for a while, but then it gets worse again. It's like it's always slowly creeping up. And unless you have a mayor and a council that are both simultaneously committed to tamping it down, it just keeps going up, because you notice all of a sudden all the candidates are talking about that. And the present mayor's talking about it. Well, he's been there for 4 years. He's had plenty of time to start working on it. So it's something that you hear over and over from the business people and the developers, and like it's easier to develop in Whitley County than it is in Fort Wayne. Now, less than we used to, but I think that's something I'd like to work on too. So yes, I'm for downtown development, but I'm for making it as easy as possible and as few regulations on the developers and the people as possible. And I'm all for participating as a city as far as doing infrastructure improvements they need to do development. That's what I think you should do as a city. Like somebody wants to build a project, your question should be, what can we do to help you make this happen, rather than you have to comply with these 13 rules. And if he says, well, I need some more roads coming in here, I need some more sewers, I need you to help me with that, that's what you do, because if you can get that project done, you get your money back with the property taxes from the improvement. But I don't think it's your job to actually invest in it or try to pick a winner or this or that, because I don't think government's good at that. So that's why I wouldn't take a lot of the light lease money and try to be investing on a specific business or this or that.
Less government regulations and involvement and intrusion.
Yes.
Yet, how do you balance that with the community's desires? For instance, we don't want a convenience store here. We don't want that type of business here.
Okay,
How do you balance that?
You can go back to my voting record. I would usually almost always consistently vote with more development, okay? Because One of the reasons for having at-large council people is you tend to take a more global look at what's good for the city. Like, for example, I guarantee you, if some big factory wanted to come in and they were going to have 1,000 high-paying jobs and it was going to be in any neighborhood in the city, they'd be against it, because not in my backyard. They wouldn't want the traffic, they wouldn't want the noise, they wouldn't want whatever. It never fails. 9 out of 10 newer projects are always opposed in Fort Wayne. 9 out of 10 of anything new is always opposed in Fort Wayne. And therefore, you have to be willing to say, okay, well, we understand that maybe you don't want that new factory, but that is the best thing for the city, and I'm going to vote for it. Whereas a district councilman, oh, he's really in the box here, because everybody that's going to vote for him is going to be mad at him if he votes for that. Only 1 of 6 people that are going to vote for me are going to be mad at me, because it's mostly going to be the one in the district. So I think I can make a better global decision, and most of my decisions were always to go ahead with development. Not always, but 9 out of 10 maybe. But I would try to make it as palatable as possible. In other words, as much screening, as much landscaping around it, as much noise reduction, as much, as we could do to make it better for the neighbors, but let the project go forward. So I tend to be for development, because in the long run, it keeps those people's taxes down too, even though maybe they might have to bear a little more brunt of the traffic.